Hello again, my good friends. How goes it? I wanted to make this video as nonchalant as possible. Maybe just kind of a ramble and a chat. I want to keep it pretty open, and I definitely don't intend it to be conflict worthy. But there will always be people who have differing opinions on everything, and that's something to be expected. I definitely welcome opinions and ideas. You know, it's one of the things that, you know, perhaps I become more open-minded as I get older, and being allowed to accept if a large group of people believe something or have a certain philosophy, then it's worth listening to because they're gaining something from it, or else completely deluding themselves, but that's up to the individual and the group. And this could be religion or politics, let's say, where a person follows a political ideal not always because they necessarily have thought it through, but because others do. Whereas some people have deeply thought through their political views and believe it strongly because it resonates with their actual thoughts and philosophies they've come up with. And I think religion is the same way. A lot of people believe in, say, Christianity because they were brought up with it and it's what they're used to and what they know, but haven't ever really dissected it. And a lot of people have dissected it intensely, and they believe it because they believe it to be true. And it's very difficult to know the difference, and when you're having a religious discussion with someone, it's hard to know where they're coming from. Whether they are just, let's say, a Bible literalist, where every word is what it says, or people who maybe just say, well, I believe in a Christ consciousness, you know. This video was more or less a response to GRIFFIN, who he sent me a message, and I don't remember the specifics, but for his own privacy, I won't specify who it was. And he made a response video, a two-part response video to one of my videos about religion. And so I thought I would get back and try to cover these aspects again, and kind of give my, not a rebuttal so much as my viewpoint on some of these things. Now, in that video you talked about ritual and how what makes religion so great is because every week you can go to church and you get together and it's a ritual and you have a group of people. And I completely understand that, and I know where you're coming from. Although I wouldn't say that that is something that is exclusive to religion. You see, ritual for me, as a perfect example, ritual for me would be going to my concerts in the summer or getting together with my groups. Like, I love the Grateful Dead, other bands. Like, I went to a Grateful Dead cover band on Saturday night called Dark Star Orchestra, and everybody there felt like family. You know, that's like my church music. And the night before I went to Lotus, and they were both phenomenal shows, but I walk out of there ecstatic and feeling great and having wonderful memories and tying and sharing that with other people. But everyone has their own particular rituals they do. You know, there's even, you know, several different types of groups that meet and do things, and they're not all necessarily religious based, although a lot are. A lot aren't as well. But maybe they're just not as, I don't know. I think what it is that groups who get together, who base what they do on just the subject at hand, aren't as likely to specify, hey, we're not religious. Whereas a group that is based, that's religious-based, that gets together for a particular purpose, lets people know about that. You know, that it's a Christ-based thing, or whatever it may be, whichever religion. I can't get into the particulars of why people do things, but you see, the religions themselves aren't the problem. And that's one thing I really wanted to cover. It's not a problem with religion. It's a problem with dogma. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a person wanting to believe in something greater and having a belief, an inherent belief. A person, you know, sometimes people think that I'm an atheist and misunderstand that. I won't even try to dignify it with an actual term. People have tried to dissect and say, well, do you believe in a God or not? And if not, you are this or this. I guess an atheist would be a lack of a belief in God, but I can't say I don't believe in God. I just won't say I believe in a specific God. You know, the other night I kind of woke up and had this, like, I don't know, it was like a Satori kind of moment where I realized that everything had come together for, you know, why there's a prime mover. You know, it doesn't have to be that there is a God, it's that everything is God. But when you get into specifics, people really want details. They really aren't too... And this is the problem I have when I'm talking with a person who is religious, and I say, well, you're a Christian, that's wonderful. Well, I believe in that everything is conscious and the universe is conscious. And I still uphold the same values and morals. I believe in doing good. And karma in its own sense, however it functions, is really irrelevant to it. It's a matter of just knowing that I don't want to do bad things because the karma is instant, because I feel guilt. That is enough karma, more than enough karma. And whether that's learned or inherent, it doesn't seem to matter. Life's too short to pick it apart. One other thing you mentioned was charity, and spoke about how many Christians in the Catholic Church, there's a lot of charity involved. And I totally agree with that. But sometimes you have to dissect the charity down to why people do it. Do they do it because they really want to do it, or do they do it out of guilt? And that's not going to be religious-based. That's going to be up to the individual. A lot of people, when they see the Vatican with all their, glory and elegant and marble statues and, hordes and hordes of all the things they've collected over the centuries, and then you find out that people are starving outside the Vatican walls, instantly, to me, it negates the whole Catholic Church. And I realize that, a person may say, well, the church has to remain intact, and they can't just give everything away. Yes, they can. If you're really going by the teachings of Jesus, then churches should be very modest, very small, and not elegant. Because to me, that's not showing your respect for God. Because if Jesus is the basis for, a religion, let's say, Jesus was a very humble man who supposedly walked in sandals and taught everyone to give everything away. Where did the, miscommunication come between then and now? But one of the things that really bothers me is the thought that anyone thinks you need a middleman between you and God. I speak to the universe, and I do it myself. I believe that a human should be born with the capacity and ability to know everything without being taught anything. And that may sound silly, but you'll have to be taught basic, survival. But when it comes to God, only in recent times have we tried to actually distinguish and decipher that, and then allow other humans to tell us what God is or what religion means. And I think that's where the problem comes in. When it comes to the charity, one of the biggest problems I have to that is the other side of why sometimes religion bothers me is when I have a discussion with someone and I say, well, what are we going to do about, let's say, this particular issue of pollution or, corruption? And then they use a term like it's in God's hands. And this is where dogma gets in the way, because it's not in God's hands. It's going, whatever's going to happen is universally going to happen, but it doesn't mean that humans are not capable of changing it. And putting it in God's hands seemed to take it out of our hands, such as the families who refuse to use modern health care for their children. The ones who won't take their kid to a hospital because they believe it should be in God's hands. And children die because their parents are too stupid to give them modern medicine. And I stand by that. Yes, modern medicine has its drawbacks, and there are times when you might give the kid the wrong thing, or where they might be able to heal on their own, but it has its place. And there are some diseases that can be cured, and parents historically who have ignored that because they believe that God will either heal or not heal. And that's maybe why religion gets in the way sometimes. Putting things in God's hands means that what good are we at all? If everything's put in God's hands, then what's the point in us even being here? Just to sin and to try to be tricked into going to hell, and getting into those discussions is where it gets hard. Religion not being the problem, but the dogma behind it. One thing that you mentioned was, and it was kind of a line that stuck with me, was that if your children aren't raised with religion, then you consider it child abuse. I really don't know how to answer that, or even, I don't even want to give a real reply to that, because it seems to be ludicrous, no offense, to say that it's child abuse to raise a kid without religion. Now, raising a child without values, absolutely. But raising them with values because they fear God or the devil, no. I think, in my opinion, I could turn that and say, if you raise your child to believe in the devil, that is child abuse. And that's how I feel about that. And I feel very strongly about that. And so I find that interesting that we have two different outlooks, that raising a kid without a religion is abuse, and I think that raising a kid to believe in the devil is abuse, because it's raising him to fear something eternally burning. It's we need to teach our children to do things out of respect, not out of fear. And I think that that's important. I think letting kids find religion and letting them prove it to themselves first, rather than trying to convince them, would be, a really good way to go about it. But I'm only, can only do my thing. One other thing you mentioned, well, because you mentioned that, with my kids and whatnot, and how I have kids, and how if you had kids, you would raise them a certain way. And I say, it's easy to say when you don't have kids, but when you actually do, opinions may or may not change, but it's much more difficult. You can't force a child to believe in something. And I've seen many of my friends who were forced to go to church and how they turned out, and how much they hate their parents, or they hate the religion that they were forced to believe in. It's happened quite a bit. I do agree when you said we need elders in children's life. I completely agree with that, but I don't think that elders are tied to religion. I think elders are everywhere. And there are a lot of elders in the church, but it doesn't mean that there aren't elders elsewhere. So, elders are all among us, and I totally agree that they need an older generation to get ideas from as well. But I really didn't understand how that related to religion at all. Now, to get into the one thing that really bothers me the most about, let's say, Christianity in general, is that it preaches tolerance, acceptance, respect and reverence for the universe, for God, for nature, but not for other religions. And I know some Christians who pity other religions because they say, well, I feel sorry for them because they're going to be going to hell. And that just seems like such a horrible way to think to me. And no offense to anyone, because I know a lot of people out there probably do think that way. There's probably somebody watching this video right now that's thinking that since I didn't take Jesus as my one Lord and Savior, that I'm going to hell because of that. And from my point of view, no matter what I did in my life to try to, if I, let's say, was trying to justify myself, let's say you had a mother, a father, or a brother or sister who just was really worried about you going to hell, and you spent your whole life saying, but no, look, I gave all my money to charity, just as an example, I gave everything away, and I spent my whole life serving other people and walking in Jesus' footsteps, doing the exact same thing he did. And a person would say, but if you didn't take him into your heart truthfully, then you're still going to hell. And this leaves a large problem, a large gap in understanding between people, because Christians aren't the majority in the world. Religions have, there are more Muslims than Christians, but for some reason the Muslims are all wrong too. But the Muslims will tell you the Christians are wrong. And this is why religion's a problem. It's not because of the individual lives that people live believing in the religion. It's the collective arrogance that comes with thinking that you have the only answer. And a person born into this world sees these big churches, hears people who are very adamant about what they believe, and they take those beliefs. And we as humans know that our brains are plastic. Neuroplasticity allows us to convince ourselves anything is true. And it makes it really hard to step back and say, wait a minute, is this really what I believe or what I've always believed? So community, as being an aspect of religion, is totally understandable, but community comes with all groups of people. And I guess if a person had grown up as a Christian and only spent time going to, say, Christian events and groups and going to church, they're not going to know what other groups go on, and they're not going to see the other side of things, that people still get together and have a great time and don't need the dogma attached to it. And I'm definitely not here to bash religion. If it works for anybody, I think it's phenomenal. I just wanted to kind of answer that, response video with some of my own ideas, that I don't think that ritual has to be something that's only religious. I've seen plenty of it that's not religious based. But as to give you an example, there are some, pagan type events, where people get together and they have these celebrations, and people call that, paganism is something that's, evil or something that's corrupt. It's like impure. Whereas paganism has many of the roots for many of the religions for today, sun worship. I mean, we still worship the sun. It's just a different type of sun, right? I hope that one day, I guess I don't know what I hope for. I don't know the question to the answer. I don't think that any day we're ever going to figure out the truth to where we're all satisfied. And I'm glad for that, because it's what keeps life interesting and mysterious, you know. We're all yearning for a little bit of truth, but when we're struggling through it, we have to question why. If our life is a struggle, we have to ask ourselves why this is happening. Because, you know, I used to believe some people just have a bad lot in life. Some people just have bad luck. And sometimes this is true. There's always going to be a percentage of people who have just bad luck. But when you really dissect it, you find out a lot of that bad luck is self-inflicted. And the more bad luck a person has, the more they might be likely to grab on to a life preserver, which sometimes can be religion. And I know people who, you know, as they're in the hospital and they're really sick, they find out that they have some disease or they're dying, they come out of there with a whole newfound understanding for religion because it helps them to get through those times. And I think that's fantastic. The only thing I would say is, if you're a religious person, try not to think everyone else is going to hell. You know, try to consider that maybe hell is for children, that maybe hell is not a real place, that maybe the real hell is what we create right here in our own lives while we're here. Because I can't see the afterlife, and I can't see my previous life if I had one, but I can see this life, and every day I work to improve it. And when external influences corrupt that, or try to tell me I'm doing something wrong when I know it's right in my heart, I ignore them. And that's why I ignore the signs of religion, because it's not complete. There is no belief system that is complete. And that's why we have to expand our horizons to everything. So I'm fascinated with all religions, you know, and they all have their place, and I respect them more than I did when I was younger. But I really don't think that they are the only place where children can gain insight. I didn't grow up religious, and I consider myself a pretty good person. But, you know, what else can I say? Anyway, have a great day, everybody, and thanks for the video, Griffin, and it was a pleasure. I'll talk to you all later.